Hello, everybody. I'm Evan Manning,
Hey, I'm August Weesey.
I'm Vince Rollman.
And I'm Morgan Burkhart.
and today we're going to be talking about a topic involving using villains as protagonists. I personally, I think this is a very situational topic. I think there are a lot of movies that use villains as protagonists in a good, ethical way. I think there are a lot of different movies that kind of do the opposite. Um, Personally, I think overall, I think these villains, these protagonists, I think they need to have a reason to be bad. I personally don't think villains in movies should just be bad for no reason. I also think that toward the end of the movie or like middle, just depending, I think they need to have a moral compass and like kind of learn or change the way that they view the world. All these situations, they can lead to future idolizations of these villains. It just kind of depends on the way that these villains are being portrayed as.
Yeah, I think they're okay as long as they don't cause physical harm or death to other people, and if they bring peace at the end of the day, and then if they have a positive influence or message they are trying to spread out to others at the end of the day.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you there. I think that villains as protagonists can be good, but I also think that I lean more towards the negative side because I worry if people become desensitized to the actions that characters carry out. And I'm more curious on the like communitarian side and worry about the greater good.
Yeah, I kind of lean with Vince. I definitely see where there could be a positive, like a lesson learned when there is a change from like a bad guy to a good guy in the protagonist. Um, but my issue comes in when they're just evil for the sake of evil, or there's no retribution in the end. I think that creators who utilize villains as their protagonists need to include an opposing force or like a voice of good to really like provide that moral compass for the audience. Example, Joe in the show You on Netflix, he's able to be just a terrible person and behave as terribly as he desires, and he still comes out on top. Versus like Despicable Me, it's a kids movie, but Gru, the main character in that, he's a bad guy. Very obviously, he likes to be a bad guy, but when he meets girls that he ends up adopting, their influence of good ends up providing that moral compass for Gru, and we see a change and we learn a lesson, which is where the value can come in versus the harm, as it would be in You, which is kind of why it would be good to, I guess, start off with discussing children's movies in all of this and how they might start in the developmental phases for kids.
Yeah, I totally agree. One of my examples that I kind of looked up was one of the famous movie Megamind. I think that overall, I think that movie has a lot of good aspects when it comes to portraying villains as protagonists. Um, I think one Megamind, he did have a reason to be bad. Uh, Also, in the end, he did learn. He realized that without a hero, he's no one. He learned to change. He learned to figure out that he actually needed these people. Um, Overall, I think that movie in particular portrayed this villain as ethically as possible. Like I said earlier, I think it is definitely situational. I think there is a possibility that kids could idolize the villains before, like, over the heroes. I think, in particular, like kids' movies, most of the villains they have a the mission, like they're trying to get vengeance from a certain hero that had betrayed them um, in the past. I think that could potentially alter those kids' mindsets for vengeance. I think that could lead to a lot of kids wanting to seek vengeance when a kid is mean to them or if someone is like misunderstanding them. Um, I definitely think that these movies don't really affect physical actions. Like I don't think kids will want to murder or, destroy a city after they watch these things. But I think it's more of an emotional uh, effect. I think this could possibly affect kids like with their emotional healing and thought process when it comes to like dealing with situations like that. For I guess I was kind of using like a Kant perspective, like could villains as protagonists are ethical only if they learn and change in the end, or only if they perceive as evil, or if they are perceived as evil, like if they have a force, or like if the hero is, equally as powerful, kind of thing. It's one of those interesting topics where it's definitely like first seeing the movie, it's definitely not a bad ethical, like you don't really think it's that bad, and then overall I think it comes down to those afterthoughts, those kids that like that want to idolize these villains and be that kind of personality. I think that's pretty interesting.
I think another one, and this is going to sound kind of dumb, but if you think about it, the first Shrek, he was a protagonist at the beginning because Lord Farquaad and all the the kings and the knights of Duloc, not the kings and knights, but all the people of Duloc wanted to keep all the magical beings, what have them off their land, and like I think in one thing, he had no choice, first of all, to be the protagonist because he had to win a tournament, he had to hurt other people, and he had to, save to win that tournament, to save the princess, and restore order to the kingdom and everything. And in the very end, he turns out to be pretty good. And he finds friendships with Donkey, and they're two opposites. And so I think stuff like that's good because obviously the character development over time, he's a villain at first, but over time, and he's hard-headed, but over time he comes to be accepting and caring of other people. And I think movies like that, even with villains as protagonists at first, I think they can really have a good impact on like have a good moral of the story, because they're not gonna they're not gonna encourage someone to do negative things. They're going to encourage people to accept people for who they are, and it's just a better moral of the story, if that makes it's a better like moral of the story, like better value, my bad, to pass.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I want to touch on something that Evan said about kids looking up to villains, because something I noticed, and once I kind of studied this topic, is I wonder if villains, once you look up to them, I wonder if they're kind of cool or fashionable, like stylish, if people will pick up on that, like audiences, like, oh, I want to be like him. And a problem that I found in my example, I watched American Psycho, which is, if you don't know, it's the story of a wealthy New York City investment banking executive. His name's Patrick Bateman. He hides his alternate psychopathic ego from his coworkers by day when he's working on Wall Street, and you learn that he dives deeper into his violent, self-indulgent fantasies by night. And what I found during this movie was I really liked this character. I thought he was interesting. It was full of like dark comedy, which I really enjoyed. But as I watched this movie, I was surprised to see how violent this main character was, and in a way that was shocking to me, because I think that there aren't many characters that are villains that are the protagonists. And I think that in a movie where it focuses around the villain, this character didn't have any moral compass. Like, he was a murderer just to be a murderer. He was looking for an identity, something to be remembered by, something to make him different than anybody else. And I worry about films like this because I wonder if we start to see more like American Psycho, if it would eventually lead to desensitization, and if these films would overall change our mindset on how people are, or if our morals would be changed. and I like to think that the communitarian approach is the best way to look at this, because I wonder if we see more movies with villains as the protagonists, if the greater good would be affected, because we would start to believe that, oh, people are naturally bad, or I wonder if we would start to see through how people acted.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic for sure. I think what you said about kind of not really idolizing the character in American Psycho, but thinking he's cool. I think a lot of films, for any kind of film, really, I think overall they create these styles, these personalities, and these aesthetics for these different characters that create fan bases, and that's becoming really popular now with different directors and different stories, that these characters have certain aesthetics that create that fan base. And I think that could lead to a lot of villains having those fan bases, and having um, those fans idolizing them, and kind of being like drawn to that personality, and kind of wanting to be those people. So I can see what you're saying about that kind of leading into a desensitization of film in general, and like of those morals.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. When I was a kid, this is kind of a goofy way to start on this, but when I was a kid, I actually preferred the villain in Kim Possible, Shigo, more than I liked Kim Possible. So I always wanted to be like her, and I was kind of a little jerk as a kid. So that kind of makes me, excuse me, that kind of makes me wonder if like kids media or like movies and shows like have a responsibility to like make bad characters and bad actions like really unappealing to kids. Like, because think of Despicable Me to Vector. He's like a really goofy, funny, relatable like character. So it almost makes you not even see him as a bad guy. So I'm wondering if like maybe that's a fuzzy line there.
Yeah,
right.
I think that.
Oh, sorry.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. I think that it's so fresh when we see villains like that, because it's almost like you can't look away. Like you want to see more, because it's so out of the ordinary.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because I feel like we see so many heroes, and it's the same old story over and over. So when we see villains that are interesting, I think we do want to idolize them, because they're so out there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think a perfect example of that, actually, the movie Infinity War. Really, the main focus was Thanos, and that whole movie was just completely intense the entire time. Like you don't know what he's going to do. Like his morals are kind of out there, and it's one of those things where you're kind of just drawn to this enemy or this villain, because you don't really know like what actions he's about to do, or what kind of moral compass he has. So it's you're almost attracted to him. Like throughout the movie, you're attracted to like different things that he's doing, and kind of idolizing, not really idolizing, but kind of just thinking of his actions as an interesting way. And it's just kind of weird that so many people think that Thanos was right. I know a couple people who have said that before. It's just weird to me that's kind of becoming a thing, is where people kind of agreeing with the villain.
Yeah, I think another one is the Joker, the new Joker movie with Joaquin Phoenix. How that's really glamorized, and I just think it's really interesting how, you know, as the worse he gets, the more you cheer for him over time, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of interesting, like wondering if we should create sympathy for the bad guy. Like, is it bad to feel bad when the bad guy loses, you know? Or like, are we supposed to be feeling that even if technically like our bad guy is our main character? And like, how do you do that without totally ruining your plot?
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think that a lot of movies that have that like compelling force, like that hero force coming at them, kind of like Infinity War, is I mean, we had the entire Avengers team fighting for this enemy, so we had that good balance of like good and evil. I definitely think in Joker we have a majority bad and really not enough good to kind of to balance them out, if that makes sense at all. I think
Yeah.
that's maybe one way that I guess society could kind of maybe like a golden mean or Aristotelian mean. I think as long as there's some kind of force that repels that bad or that villain's mindset, I think that would help a lot with different people idolizing the villain.
Yeah, and then kind of going back, we started to touch on this like almost an infatuation with the bad guys and how you want to keep seeing them, like you were talking about with Thanos, Evan.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of that kind of goes into Joe on You and on the Netflix series. That's the issue that Penn Badgley, the man who plays Joe, has brought up himself on Twitter. He's been finding issues with his audience, and his fans are starting to like idolize Joe as the ideal like romantic partner. And it like kind of he's expressed his own concerns, and I'm also concerned with maybe like that idolization excuses some actions which would usually be red flags. Like he steals his girlfriend's phone and he's practically stalking her, and he's stalking her friends, and maybe the stalking the friends seems like a red flag, but that makes stealing the phone seem not quite as bad, which in the end could lead to a lot of messy relationships for the audience who got this idea from a TV show, which really doesn't have an opposing voice of good in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think overall this specific topic, I think we could always bring up like, yeah, we can figure out what's ethical and what's not, but a question I could kind of bring up is like, what's the line that we bring to filmmakers who have the right to make kind of like their film or their story, like the difference between what society wants versus the filmmaker's right, if that makes sense.
Right. Well, I think that it really comes down to like I looked at it through a kind of perspective. Just
Mm-hmm.
I think we can see movies that focus on a villain, but I just think as long as they're not violent, I think that's really the key. That we're not focusing on not encouraging, but violence. But the focus of it, I think really that's what it comes down to. Because I feel like we wouldn't want to see so many movies where people are being killed and that's the focus of the story, but it's looked at in a positive light. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on where movies should not see murder or violence as a positive light in the movie. I think that's a lot of desensitization. I think that would overall kind of make society worse.
I definitely agree that like we shouldn't focus on violence, but I don't know if violence is the only marker of like a villainous protagonist, because that makes you think of like the Wolf of Wall Street and Jordan Belfort. Yeah, he really wasn't a violent man, but he broke like hundreds of laws and he was a terrible person to others. So it kind of does still make me wonder where the line would be, because I don't know if I can quite agree that violence is the only line there.
I think it's overall, it's just where you stand, like morally, like you said, Jordan Belfort didn't kill anyone. He broke, hundreds upon hundreds of laws. He cheated on multiple wives. He wasn't very, a morally correct person, but I think it really just like, it really just depends on like where your values are morally, because not everyone has the same values, whereas murder is bad, or lying or cheating or stealing or whatever is bad.
Sure. There used to be a code of morals to keep everyone on the same page, where right now we're seeing, like, you know, some of us think violence is the line, and I personally, I think there might be a little more to it. Hollywood used to have the Hollywood Production Code, which was around like the 1930s, and it was like they kept it for about 3 decades, and it had like ultimatums in it almost, and said things like no plot theme should definitely side with evil and against good, or no plot should by its treatment throw sympathy of the audience with sin, crime, wrongdoing, or evil, which I don't necessarily think it was right of Hollywood to limit creators like that, but I do wonder if maybe there should be some sort of more fleshed out moral code, because that was replaced just with like film ratings, the MPAA film ratings, which definitely can help, and I think that would help, you know, put more responsibility on the audience to decide what their moral code is and what they want to see based on that. But I definitely think there needs to be a little something, not like mandatory, but at least recommended for a moral compass in Hollywood.
Yeah, I agree. I think overall, I think movies, I think they should not, I think we shouldn't monitor them to where like most villains aren't allowed to be protagonists. I think there are a lot of ways that we could get around idolizing them and having them have that aesthetic and have that pleasing sense. I definitely think as long as there's like another, you know, the good side that we could argue with, I think as long as that they have that like that sense of I guess I'm trying to explain this, but that sense of reality in the movie, I think we should have one of those views or a character or a group that has that moral mindset that we can like return to, if that makes sense at all, like returning to the normal world rather than just being in this movie filled with like, you know, villain perspectives, and like it's not a very real I guess as long as there's a realistic perspective in the movie, I think we can kind of accept a lot of villains as protagonists, if that makes sense at all. That might have been too confusing.
No, sorry. No, I think the word I'm looking for is contrast, right? There needs to be a contrast of good and evil.
Yes.
I definitely agree with you there that like there can't be all of one and there can't be like all of another. It needs to be a little bit of both, just to make you realize how bad a character could be. Because
Yeah.
if you just constantly like bad, getting worse, like it may not seem like 0 to 100, but if you're like flashing back and forth between like the villain and then like a cop that's on their trail, and well, this is all the bad things they've done and these are all the repercussions of every action they've taken, that's how you find that like the golden mean.
Yeah, for sure. I think what a simpler way, what I was like trying to get out there was maybe like to portray, like to not have a film portray the good side as the bad side. I know like I'm a big fan of the movie Joker. Like I don't really have a lot of problems with it. But it does perceive like the cops and like a lot of the normal sides as evil. And I get that movie was definitely trying to portray as like this is a society thing. We need to fix society. But a lot of us can see that like this is leading to a lot of idolizations of the villain and sometimes making it worse, if that makes sense.
Right. I do think that makes sense. Like I think it does come down to the perspective that we have on each of these cases, because with this topic, I think a lot of it is situational. Like I think each character is situational. I don't think that all villains are the same. I don't think all heroes are the same. So I think it really depends on their situation and where they are and how that, you know what I mean, how, you know, if that's seen through each case.
Yeah.
So like, I'm kind of wondering then, is there this kind of ground where maybe there isn't an equal contrast of bad to good, but we see the bad, and like as an outside party can see this protagonist who is a villain slowly, like their life is falling apart, like Breaking Bad. You know, he starts as a good man, he's doing bad things but for good reasons, and you slowly start to see those morals degrade, and you see like his family life disintegrates, his home is just demolished in the end. Like, is it okay for that to be a cautionary tale and that's like the end of it, or does there need to always be that contrast, like verbally we hear a secondary character, or is it, you know, is it on the audience to be that moral compass sometimes, as long as the downside is made clear, like in Breaking Bad?
I think for the audience's sake, since you know movies are entertainment in general, if they're just looking for entertainment value, it should simply be just used for entertainment value, nothing more. And you know, you just have to hope in that case that the people that are watching your film are going to have a good moral compass to decipher what's wrong and right.
Yeah, I totally agree.